Chapter 2 of First Chronicles begins with a straight genealogy of the sons of Jacob or Israel. The writer names them off: Reuben, Simeon, Levi, Judah, Issachar, Zebulun, Dan, Joseph, Benjamin, Naphtali, Gad, and Asher. Today, we're going to look closer at that list. Hi, I'm Ken Godevanis, and this is Digging for Scriptural Gems. We note that these sons of Jacob were not listed in their chronological order of birth, which was as follows as recorded in the book of Genesis. With Leah, Jacob's first wife, Jacob had Reuben, Simeon, Levi, and Judah. With Bilhah, Rachel's handmaid, Rachel being his second wife, her handmaid, he had Dan and Naphtali. With Zilpah, Leah's handmaid, so we go back to the first wife, but her handmaid, he had Gad and Asher. With Leah again, his first wife, he had Issachar and Zebulun. And then with Rachel, his second wife, he had Joseph and Benjamin. Leah was Jacob's first wife and bore half of the sons. She bore 6 of them. Rachel, Jacob's second and most beloved wife, struggled with infertility for many years before giving birth to Joseph and later Benjamin. When Rachel and Leah experienced periods of being unable to conceive, they followed the custom of the time by offering their handmaids, Bilhah and Zilpah, to Jacob to bear children on their behalf. Now, in addition to these 12 sons, the biblical text mentions that Leah also gave birth to a daughter named Dinah, who was born after Zebulun. Benjamin, the final child, was the only son born in the land of Canaan. The others were all born in Padum Aram, or Mesopotamia. And Rachel died shortly after Benjamin's birth. But today, let's go back and look more closely at what a handmaid was back then and the role a handmaid played in this genealogy. In the context of the Old Testament and the ancient Near East, the term handmaid, or shipshah in Hebrew, Shipchah, refers to much more than just a domestic servant. It describes a specific social and legal status, especially a female slave or personal attendant who belonged directly to the mistress of the house, not the master. In a patriarchal society, a handmaid was often part of a bride's dowry. When a woman married, her father would provide her with a handmaid who remained her personal property, rather than the property of her new husband. Her job was to serve the personal needs of the wife. If the wife was unable to conceive, she had the legal right, the wife that is, had the legal right and often the social pressure to build a family through her handmaid. Children born from this arrangement were legally considered the children of the wife, not the handmaid. The story of Jacob provides the most famous example of this practice. Jacob's 2 wives, the sisters Leah and Rachel, were each given a handmaid by their father Laban. Now, the competition between Leah and Rachel was rather intense. When Rachel realized she was barren, she followed the custom established by her grandmother-in-law, Sarah, who had given Hagar, her handmaid, to Abraham. Rachel gave Bilhah to Jacob so that she could bear children on her knees, that is, on Rachel's knees. That's quite a phrase, bear children on my knees, or bear children on Rachel's knees. Leah, despite already having 4 sons, eventually stopped conceiving for a period. To maintain her status and continue growing the family, she followed Rachel's lead and gave Zilpah to Jacob. While Bilhah and Zilpah bore 4 of the 12 patriarchs of the tribes of Israel, their status remained distinct from Leah and Rachel. They were concubine wives. While they had a sexual relationship with Jacob and bore his children, they did not have the same social standing or authority as the matriarchs. But despite their lower status, their children were not treated as illegitimate in the modern sense. They were fully integrated into the family and received an equal share of the inheritance among the 12 tribes. Let me just give you this note on context. In the days of Jacob, this wasn't seen as cheating or a breakdown of the marriage. It was a formal legal mechanism used to ensure the survival of the line, though as the biblical narrative shows, it certainly created a high-stress, competitive domestic environment. Now, even though this was a legal mechanism, it didn't make it a spiritual or godly approved mechanism. He certainly allowed it, but he didn't call for it or order it. But what about this idea of bearing children on Rachel's knees? What is that all about? Well, the phrase bear children on my knees, Genesis chapter 30, verse 3, is an ancient legal idiom for adoption through surrogacy. In the context of Jacob, Rachel, and her handmaid Bilhah, it signifies a formal process where a child born to a servant was legally and socially claimed by the mistress. Bilhah, Rachel's servant, acted as the biological surrogate mother. Rachel, as the owner of the servant, held the legal rights to any offspring Bilhah produced. That is, the legal mother. Rachel was the legal mother. Now, the mention of knees isn't just poetic. It refers to a symbolic and literal ritual of legitimacy. It is widely believed that during the birth, the mistress would sit behind or near the servant, the mistress in this case being Rachel, sometimes literally placing the newborn on her own knees the moment it was born. This physical contact signaled to the community, this child is mine. In many ancient cultures, placing a child on one's knees was a formal gesture of acknowledgement and adoption, the legal claim. By having Bilhah give birth on her knees, meaning Rachel was performing the ancient equivalent of signing a birth certificate. The context of this request is a heated rivalry between sisters. Rachel was frustrated by her infertility, while her sister Leah had already pivoted into a baby-making machine type of mode, bearing Jacob 4 sons already. So Rachel's logic was, hey, behold my maid Bilhah, go in unto her, she says to her husband, and she shall bear upon my knees, that I may also have children by her. Now, by using Bilhah as a surrogate, Rachel wasn't just looking for a babysitter, she was trying to gain social leverage, and build her own branch of the family tree to compete with Leah. The resulting children, Dan and Naphtali, were considered Rachel's legal sons within the tribal structure of Israel. Next time, we will talk about the genealogy of one of those sons, namely Judah, the 4th son of his first wife, Leah. Join us for that. In the meantime, if you like what you're seeing, please indicate so. If you haven't subscribed yet, go to YouTube, Digging for Scriptural Gems, subscribe, but above all, keep on studying the Word of God.